All right. Very good. So tonight we're going to go through some teachings of Sri Sharada Devi in a chapter called Advice to Householders, just to get into some of the real teachings that Holy Mother passed on to us. And this one, Advice to Householders, I chose only because sometimes there's a big difference made between the monastics and the householders. And I think at some levels that's appropriate, obviously, but at other levels, sometimes people get the impression that that's the only way to do it, or that if you're a householder, then you're automatically not going to get a blue ribbon. And I just want to battle that with some of Holy Mother's own teachings about the subject, and to see if she can help us kind of come up with a good perspective on what it is that we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. So she says, those who belong to a very high plane of existence alone can take to the monastic life and free themselves from all bondages. Yeah, so now, interestingly enough, she's not just talking about taking to the monastic life. She's got an and in there. So the accolades or the high plane of existence is manifested not in just joining a monastery. Certainly, it doesn't take that just to join a monastery, but to free themselves from all bondages. That takes an incredibly high achievement of mind, a very pure mind, a very, a real working out of karma. So it's that combination of joining the monastery and freeing themselves from all bondages. Again, there are some who are born to have a little taste of this worldly life. I say that one should see through worldly enjoyments. Let X, whoever this person is, let X marry and finish all enjoyments in this life. Otherwise, there is no knowing when he may fall a victim to some unfulfilled desire. But you may be sure of this, that so long as he remains under the master's protection, he can never slip.
Which page are you on, Maharaj?
We are doing, Kamala, we're doing it out of this book for this week.
Which book is that?
This is the teachings of Sri Sharada Devi. We did a few of them before.
Not the small one that you have been. No, okay.
We're taking a break. I'm messing everything up.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to just get into some actual teachings. I was kind of being frustrated a little bit with the way the book is reading, because the book is so far, is teaching me more about Ramakrishna than about Holy Mother. And so I wanted to jump into something a little bit more direct for a week, just for my own.
Yeah, I thought you were reading from a small book, Teachings of Sharada Devi. Okay.
Yes. So I'm doing that for this week, just to get some more direct teachings from the Holy Mother. And so she's saying, the thing about householder life is Thakur says many times that householders can realize God, that it can be done through that path, and it can be done through the monastic path also. And ultimately, the requirements for both are the same. And in a sense, in a playful sense, all of us are monks by the end. None of us gets to leave this world with our family. None of us gets to leave this world with our house and our cars. In the end, we renounce everything, whether it was willful or not. We leave it all behind. And through the householder life, you get to test it and see it. You get to experience what married life is, what raising a family is, what paying your bills is, having to go out and till the dust of the earth, as the Bible says, for all of your enjoyments, all of your desires, paying for all of those things. And if either life is lived with discernment and lived with attention, you learn. And I think in householder life, you can learn very quickly if you keep an honest discernment going with how things are in life and what these things give to us. And if you carry that through the whole process, it brings you to monasticism in your old age, that the sannyas, that last stage of development. And so it prepares you for the ultimate renunciation, which is to die with attention, with presence of mind, to understand all of these things were always said to be temporary.
So true, so true, so true.
Yes, they're all temporary and they all go. And in the last days of our life, that becomes more clear than at any other point in our life. And especially as a householder, I think that lesson remains very prominent in that old age. As you wish that your children visited more often, or you wish that you didn't buy a 2-story house with stairs, or all of these things that we go through as we age. Paying attention as a devotee, which is instructions for everyone, for all of us together, is what brings us to that enlightenment. And so here Mother is saying that the householder path is given for those who need to and are really intent on learning the truth of the matter. They have to get through that period of desire, and they're not going to not going to take someone else's word for it. You want proof and evidence, and so you live the life as a householder, as a devotee, and if it's done with earnestness and sincerity, it can deliver you to the feet of the divine, just like a monastic life can. And this idea of everyone becoming a monk, which Swamiji does say that everyone, you have to become a sannyasin in order to realize God. You have to use Swamiji's definition of a sannyasin, for that, in the fact that, yes, it's true. We all have to renounce. But that can be done as a householder also, as you go through the stages. The difference is internal renunciation as opposed to external renunciation. It's knowing the truth and coming to that truth and accepting that truth, so that when you go, you lay down your mat, you say your goodbyes, and you leave the world, ready to go. And that's how it looks. For the monk, it's a different process. It'll just be his fellow monks saying goodbye at the end. And he'll leave behind just enough for a bandara. I think that's what it's called, to buy some food for the rest of his brothers. All right, so number 2, when a young man out of temporary dispassion expressed unwillingness to marry, Mother said, "How is that? God has created things in pairs, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 legs, and likewise man and woman." So justifying that, it's saying because this young man was, and quite often you see this wrong kind of attitude toward marriage, that it's almost a sign of failure in the spiritual realm, or that it's a terrible compromise. But it's not. It's part of the plan of the beloved. It's part of the plan of God. As we've seen and learned, many of the avatars, got married, and some of them had families. And so there is no shame in it. There is no second class in it. And that kind of thinking should be done away with, because here is Mother saying, no, God has designed it this way. He has put this path here for us. To someone hesitant about marriage, Mother said, why can't one lead a good life as one is married? The mind alone is everything. Did not the Master marry me? So she's making that point. The mind is everything. Your attachments have to be broken. That's how it's done, And we do that by learning to see God in all of our relationships. For the householder, it's looking and seeing the divine in each person in your house and worshiping them as God, worshiping God through them. Just like the Master told that woman that came with that deep attraction to her grandson and told her to put his picture on the shrine. He didn't tell her, "Oh, get over your attachment, you second-class citizen, do your work." Nothing like that. It was yes, put that picture on your shrine and look through it, see it. It's a matter of expansion. We've talked about that before. That we're looking for the reduction of ego. All practice really is about reducing or defeating ego, killing the ego. And family life can definitely do that. When you marry, your ego has to cut in size by half for a healthy marriage. That you have to now compromise. You've got two people to take care of their needs and their desires. And so you have to work that out. You have to let go of yourself to some extent in order for that relationship to work. And then you have kids, and your ego has to reduce that much more because now you've got this many people to take into consideration. You can't go do all the things that you would do on your own like that. And so over time, Swami Prabhupada explained to me the difference between those two paths, and I've shared that multiple times. But for the householder, it's expansion. You grow your sense of family one by one as the family increases, and as it becomes grandchildren, and as it becomes friends of friends, and as it becomes, whatever form it takes. That idea of the family expands through time, and your ego reduces as it takes care of more and more people. And for the monk, the monks is a little bit different. Swami told me, the monk pushes everybody back to the level of just a friend, to start his journey, pushes his family, mom and dad and brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, pushes them all back, gets them all equal distance far away. But that's not the ideal. The ideal then is to bring everybody forward one step at a time until everybody is your mother. Everybody is your brother. Everybody is your son, your daughter, your grandmother. And you see that in all folks. And so it's that seeing the divine with the divine spark in everyone is the means of reaching true monasticism. It's the means of reaching our enlightenment. And so whether you're doing that in the householder practice of expansion, one by one, growing your sense of self to include everyone, your sense of family to include everyone, or you do it as a monk where you push it all away and bring everybody forward one step at a time until you've reached the same understanding that we are one, we are all family. One disciple said to Mother that he had tried to lead an unmarried life, but now found it impossible to remain a celibate. Mother gave him assurance and said, "Don't be afraid to marry. Sri Ramakrishna had many householder disciples. Go and marry. Don't worry." Right? So you see even in this young man, that sense of failure. Like I've tried, I can't do this. And going to the Divine Mother and say, "Well, what do I do?" And she says, "Well, of course, you gave it your effort. The householder path is for you. That's all. Take the householder path and not the monastic path." And encouraged him to go and get married. To sincere lay disciples who spoke of envying monastic life, Mother would say, "Is the ochre robe everything? You will realize God without it. What is the need of taking the ochre robe?" So there you have that assurance from the Divine Mother. What is the ochre robe? It's not like that. This division is not about two halves. All this stuff is about you and me as individuals. It's not groups that are going to make this happen. It's our relationship with the divine, our relationship with God. And that, being an ochre robe is one way of being a devotee. The other way is to, like those householder devotees, that one man that had orange underwear. And he showed a very Indian scenario, but he literally had an ochre kalpina that he wore underneath his clothes for his own monasticism, but he was a householder man. He was kind of incognito monk. And so it's what color you are on the inside that makes a difference. It's the color of your mind that makes a difference. Are you renouncing? Are you discerning? Are you seeing God in the people around you and serving them as such? These are the way that we measure our growth. Swamiji gave us those two ways the only two ways of measuring spiritual growth. He said, number one, are you unselfish? And number two, are you loving? He says, to the extent that you can say yes to both of those questions, to that extent you're growing as a disciple, as a spiritual seeker. And I can assure you that question is equally difficult for the monk and for the householder to answer, and to grow in and to improve in. Disciple, the master said that those who would accept him as their spiritual ideal would not be born again. Again, Swamiji said that no liberation is possible without being initiated into sannyasa. What then will be the way out for householders? Mother, yes, what the master said is true, and what Swamiji said is also equally true. The householders have no need of external renunciation. They will
I'm
spontaneously
in class. I could do.
Oh, then we'll call you
Oop.
later. Bye.
No, that's
Sorry.
okay. I turned the video
We
on.
have to go. We only have a second.
Okay. Sorry about that. So he says so this is the point right here. We're getting right to the meat and we're only 4 verses in or 6 verses in. So what is the way then out for householders? Mother, yes, what the master said is true, and what Swamiji said is also equally true. The householders have no need of an external renunciation. They will spontaneously get internal renunciation, but some people need external renunciation. Why should you be afraid? Surrender yourself to the master and always remember that he stands behind. So you see, she's saying it's a matter of the type of renunciation. And again, it harkens to that notion that none of us leaves this world as a householder. None of us do. We all become monks in the end. We all give up everything. We give up everything, but at the end of life, you know, and for all of us have to come to that point. The monk can do it with external renunciation, which means he removes himself from the world to do that. For the householder, the exact same requirement, you know, is to become an internal monastic, which means you may not drive your family out and away from you. You may not quit your job and all of that, but in the end, you've discerned, and you walk away from it when it's time for that, when it's time to walk away from it. And so Mother says that both paths lead to a full renunciation. For the monk, external; for the householder, internal. So if you're not an external monk, you still, in your ideal, are an internal monk, you know. Spiritual progress becomes easier if husband and wife agree in their views regarding spiritual practices. This is one of the great advantages of a marriage, is to have that intimate partner to move forward in spiritual life. It's really a great boon for those who are able to have that. You know, it's not often that both husband and wife or both partners accept the same spiritual ideal at the same degree of commitment. You know, it seems to me that women quite often have a deeper commitment to the practice than often the men do. At least there's always more women in the congregations that I've been a part of than men. And so to have that kind of equality, to have that kind of interest, that shared love of the divine is both an ideal and a boon. You know, it's a great help. And so, you know, if you're a youngster out there, I don't know if we have any youngsters that are getting married, but if you have one or no one, tell them to try and pick one that's spiritual, one that will be helpful to them. Number 8, a disciple. The scriptures declare that in the service of her husband, a woman may find divine beatitude and union with the divine. If a woman tries to lead a life by self-control, by pleading and reasoning with her husband somewhat against his wishes, is that a sin? Mother, if it is for the sake of God, it is not sin. One must control the senses. You know, so you see here, even the ideal is the same. Even the self-control is the same. You know, quite Master's instructions, although as high of an ideal as they are, you know, he says that, you know, have 1 or 2 children and then live like brother and sister. That's the ideal. So self-control ultimately is the ideal for both the householder and for the monastic. And you know, life pretty much leads us in that direction anyway. You know, the older we get, you know, the mind changes. We transcend things, we learn things, we accept things, and we come to know our nature for doing any kind of practice at all. And so this is an important thing to recognize, because there are a person with self-control will be able to reach states of understanding that are very difficult to attain any other way. Of course, God's grace, any statement that anybody makes like that of an absolute mother can definitely, at her will, make it untrue. But in general, self-control is very important. That if we don't have that self-control, the mind doesn't lift beyond those interests. The mind can't transcend the needs and desires of the body if you're deeply associated with the body. And in order to carry on physical relationships with folks, you have to be deeply entrenched in your idea of a body as a body. It's just the way the mind is. And so that self-control is in the end ultimately necessary in order to be able to truly understand that you're not the body and that you're not the mind, and to give you the ability through discernment to renounce when you come to understand that, and that it's a requirement for everyone. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, one must practice self-control after the birth of one or two children. So that's the one we just referenced. That it's not a free-for-all. Although it is, it's the tools. I'm getting into the chuckling here because I'm getting into stuff I don't really want to talk about, but this this purity, this physical purity is beneficial and is necessary for seeing things, the subtle things within, the keys to inner life. To be able to not just know in your mind that you're not the body mind, but to actually experience yourself as not being body and not being mind, requires a great deal of interior subtlety, interior seeing, interior knowing. And without the external practices to support that internal unselfishness, meaning denial of the desires of the body and mind, it's very difficult. Never impossible, because God can do anything, but very difficult to transcend and to reach your ideal.
So, Maharaj,
yes,
comment.
Please.
Meaning that the disciples who were asking Mother these questions, they must have had control over the other senses, because to me, the other senses are easier to control, but yet we can't even do that, whether it is of taste, or whether it is what we see or what we read, or how we interact, or using the other senses, leave alone the sexual urges. But so these disciples, I'm thinking they must have really conquered that, and then therefore they are, or
well, I don't think we can make any assumptions about all of them, because we don't know who many of them are. But in regards to that, you're right. I mean, all the senses have to be brought under control. The sexual orientations are more difficult because they're pretty much built into the material body. They're built into the system.
And therefore I say that perhaps it's easier to start from the senses that are easier to control, and
right.
And ways you build up your tenacity and your your courage and your strength, and your thinking is corrected by the time you reach this, but especially if you're married. This, to me, I like. Starting with this would be a real, foolish thing, because you haven't even taken care of the other senses yet, which are easier to control.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And this is, I think she's making that distinction of the householder path. The householder's path is the answer to that, that You don't go for cutting off the most difficult one first.
Right.
If you are at that stage or you are inspired to that, then the monastic path is for you. But the vast majority of people, it's not. That's not where it's at right now for them. And I think instead of looking at this as success and failure or growth and not growth, I've kind of I've done a lot of interior work to kind of let go of that sort of judgmental thinking about myself, because it gives me so much baggage to carry on in my spiritual life, that I'm always dealing with how well am I doing, how am I, and I drag that into the shrine with me. And you walk into the shrine, you feel guilty, or you feel ashamed, or you feel unworthy, you feel inferior, all these things that can come up upon that. Or if you're doing really well, you walk in with a swagger, hey, here's your favorite devotee, coming to do you a favor of offering a flower. I picked this one out myself. Both of those are troublesome. And if we take this approach to spiritual life of measuring things like that as success and failure, I don't know how helpful that is. And kind of the alternative that I'm experimenting with, and if this is helpful, great. If it's not, we'll get past it in a minute. Is to use everything to keep your eyes on the beloved, on God. That if your mind is very active, use that active mind to remind you that you are not. That you're observing an active mind, and that you can see the activity because you're not active. If you're, if you are terribly impure and just aren't making any big success on that, use that to remind you of grace. Use that to contemplate how big unconditioned love must be for me to be acceptable to the divine, right now. And first, always know that you're acceptable to the divine. That mother's going to take you wherever you are. She's going to bring you forward. And that love, wherever she picks you up, is going to be the same love. So mother's love doesn't change as your behavior changes, as your spiritual growth changes. Mother, it's not like that. Mother, wherever and whenever she meets you with an unconditioned love. And it's that unconditioned love that is going to lift you out of your tamas or your wherever you're stuck with whatever you're stuck in. And so instead of using your failures and successes to measure how you're doing, which in the world of grace isn't appropriate anyway, use all of those things to keep your eyes on the truth. Use your weaknesses to keep your eyes on the truth. In the example that I always use of Girish Ghosh, Thakur used his weakness to put his mind on God. Told him, every time you take a glass of wine, hold it up and thank Mother for that glass of wine and for the bliss you think you'll find in it. And so use all of your vices, use everything in your life, the good and the bad, the seeming negative and the seeming positive. Use it to put your mind back on God. If you've fallen, don't sit there and knock yourself out in disappointment over it. Use that pain to bring your mind to the beloved. Use your knowledge or the growing faith in an unconditioned love to heal the hurt, to heal the shame, to heal the remorse, and go forward. Don't keep these measures in your mind. They're not helpful, and they're not what God is doing. They're not what God is about. God keeps no record of wrongs. Your own mind keeps that record of wrongs. It's up to you to transcend mind. And you do that by grace. And we think of grace constantly because of weakness, because of we know what we are, because we know who we are. And we know that being a perfect human being was what was expected from the beginning. So if we manage to live as a perfect human being, great. We've reached zero. We have no debt, right? But we haven't, we've done all kinds of things. So every one of us is in debt, but it's a debt to mercy, and it's a debt to unconditioned love. It's a debt to infinite grace. And that is the whole point. It is by grace alone that we touch the feet of the divine. It's by grace alone that we reach our enlightenment, our knowledge of the self. It's by grace alone that we're devotees in any form, in any style. It's by grace alone. And so use everything about yourself, your positives and your negatives, to teach you of grace. Accept that grace. And the harder that it is to do, the more benefit there is to you in doing it. If you just can't believe, if you've continuously done the same thing wrong over and over and over, and you just can't shake it, it's going to take greater faith for you to accept that grace. It's going to take a greater faith for you, a greater knowledge of unconditioned love for you to accept that grace. But see, through the acceptance of that grace, what is born is inspiration, right? If you can accept that grace, that unconditioned love, the thing that changes in you is your level of inspiration, which is the only motive that we want as seekers to lift us out of our faults, out of our weakness. It's that grace. And so we act out of graciousness. We don't act out of compulsion, out of shame, out of, all of those negative aspects. We want our practice to come through inspiration, through a love of God. And the way that we fall in love with God is by constantly thinking and trying to grow and stretch our understanding of unconditioned love, of infinite grace. And then we live in response to that. And we're holy because of that. Not because of our strength, not because of our greatness, not because of our self-control, because of grace. Because God loved us first. And we are inspired to return that love. That's how the universe is. God loves first, and our entire existence is a response to that. That's the spiritual life. That's how we get there. So she's saying, if it's for the sake of God, there is no sin in it. So anything that you're doing motivated by love for God is the right thing to do. Even if it's trying to raise your partner's mind up a little bit. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, one must practice self-control after the birth of one or two children. Regarding family, people who wanted to renounce worldly life, Mother said, if you really want to give up, first make suitable arrangements for the subsistence of your dependents. Right? So none of this walking out on a marriage because you've reached the state of renunciation. If you're going to renounce, if you're going to break your marriage vow, or you're going to break your ties to your family, you have to provide for their sustenance. And that doesn't mean dumping them on your relatives. That means you work until you can provide for them. And if you can't, then it's not your path. You chose your path already. Work with it, work through it. And if you've decided that it's time for something different, or if it's deep enough of a renunciation, then Mother will provide the means. Mother will provide the means. Regarding earning money and accumulating it, Mother said, you have your wife and children. You should lay by something for them. What you have to consider, my boy, is that if you put by something, there will be some provision for your family in the future. Besides, you will be able to serve the holy men too. If you have nothing, what will you give to the holy men, my dear? So this is that relationship of the householder with money. You're encouraged as a householder to make money, to make a lot of money, to make as much money as you want. However, you have to understand that first, you're a servant of your own family. You have to take care of your family and meet their needs. Second, you're a servant of the holy people in your life, the monks and the nuns that you're with, the center that you're around, the temple you're around. You're the means of sustenance for that ideal. And then beyond that, you're the servant of your society as well, to take care of the hungry, to take care of the needy, to take care of the broken. Your responsibility is to a society. So the amount of money isn't what's important. It's not a question of how much am I allowed to make as a devotee. The question is, how much can you possibly give to the world around you? How much power does Mother give to you to be an effort of change. And so you should have that kind of attitude toward your money. If you're just collecting it and building it up and storing it up, beyond a realistic measure of a humble man or woman, then you have a bad relationship with money, whether you're a householder or not. You know, it's a matter of viewing your money, your wealth, as a means of expressing your devotion, expressing love. You know, money is a means of love. Money is a means of compassion. Money is a means of removing suffering. And so if you have enough for your family, great. Lay up a little bit extra for their future, perfect. Then take care of the holy people around you in your life, and then take care of your society at large. And after that, there should be nothing left. That's what money is for, and that's how we as devotees think about money, right? Money in and of itself is just mind, right? That piece of paper actually means nothing. If we hadn't all agreed that it meant something, it would mean nothing. My child, whatever one is, if he comes in the garb of a sannyasin, you do sadhu seva, service to holy people, by offering him something or serving him in some way. This is how we hold on to the ideal, right? This is how we build up the ideal inside. It's not for us to judge each other, whether it's a sannyasin or whether it's your neighbor or whether it's your daughter or whether it's your partner. It's not for you to judge. It's not for you to look at the way somebody's living and feel like you need to get into their life and fix things. That's not the way that the divine has put this world together. Your faults are your faults, and those are your attention, and those are your duty. Your daughter's faults, your son's faults, your wife's faults, your aunt's faults, your neighbor's faults are exactly that. They are their faults and their responsibility, and they will take care of it. It's not even up to you to have an opinion about it. You're just causing suffering for yourself, and you're causing suffering for your family members if you're running around seeing the faults and making snarky recommendations about what they should do with this, that, or the other. You know, you have to detach not just from the world, but from other people's faults as well. You can't remain interested in the faults of others. Leave them to themselves. And if you want to be involved, just be an encouragement. Just look for the good in somebody and make it your business to not correct the faults, but to encourage the good, right? That's very important in our relationships, especially family relationships and friendships. It's not just not looking for faults, it's looking for the good and making it your mission to fan those flames, to encourage the good that you see in others, more than trying to fix the wrongs you perceive in others. And why is that so important? Because a baby knows no thief, right? That's our old knowledge. You can't see the faults of others if they don't exist within you, right? A baby, you can go into a baby's room, steal all of his diapers. He's not going to call the cops, right? Not going to happen. He's going to let you have those diapers, and he's going to go on playing with his toys. He doesn't care at all. So the baby sees no thief, so don't you see one either. Amongst family and friends, anyway.
Mommy, can I interrupt?
Please.
Okay. So, I really loved what you said about taking your own weaknesses and seeing grace in them. This whole thing that you just mentioned is, in my opinion, under my own eye, my biggest weakness. I probably have bigger ones that I don't see coming, but this is my biggest one that I know of. How on earth do we flip around that like almost like ingrained reflexive habit of finding fault with people into an opportunity for grace? Like, any suggestions on that? Because there's multiple ways you could do it, I think, but
There are,
there's no
and if you can't come up with, yeah,
there's
no,
like this like icky satisfied feeling that you get from thinking that you're better than other people, and that for the most part has been the sustenance of my identity for a long time. you know, I am this person and this person's like that. So like I'm much cooler and better. So it's like that ingrained samskara that I just really am so tired of, but it's in there.
Mhm. Yeah, and I get it because it's in me also. I mean, we're all suffering with this, which is why the world's in the shape that it's in. The thing that has helped me is becoming aware of it is the first thing. You know, you have to learn to catch yourself as it happens, right? And I've shared that story the first time that I really had developed that seeing of my own self was when I was walking through the living room one time in the monastery, and I saw a devotee there that annoyed me. But I had always just kind of left it at that, you know, and wouldn't be bothered unless they were actively annoying me. But one day I walked through the living room and saw that person sitting there, and my mind said to me, "Oh, I don't like that person." And I caught it. I heard the mind say that, and I instantly went through the door into the monastery where I could be alone, and I sat there, and I just mentioned to myself, I was like, mind, why did you do that? Now every time you see that person, you're not going to be able to take them on a level playing field. You're not going to be able to approach them with grace and with love, because every time you see them, they're going to have to dig themselves out of the hole of you don't like them. I said that you don't want to be that way. So it's to catch it when it happens in you, understand the how that hurts that person, and your ability to love that person, your ability to help that person, come to an awareness of that. That's one thing. The second thing is when mother says, you know, if you want peace, my child, don't see the faults of others, see your own faults. She doesn't do that just because that's the better way to do it. She's doing that, she's saying that because, again, if you can see that fault in that person, it's because you have it. You've experienced it. You know it. And if you hate the fault in that other person, it's because you haven't successfully overcome that fault within yourself, and you have that added energy within you of like, oh, I hate that. But the fact is, you don't hate the fault in that person. What the fact is you hate the fault in yourself, and you haven't gotten the success in overcoming it. And so you've got your energy, and you've now externalized it, and you're fighting your inner fight externally with that person and the fault they represent to you. So it's becoming aware of the way the mind works. For that to happen, part 3 is you have to know that you're not your faults. You're not your mind, right? So you have to understand that these things do not define you. Your faults do not define you. Your good things don't define you either. You know, it's the free flowing, the ability for, well, the free flowing of love from you is what indicates spiritual health. If love can't flow freely through you, the ego is blocking it. And the ego is the one that would externalize your internal fight by seeing the fault in someone else and going after it. Because you're not feeling good about your own success, the ego then goes to find that feeling good about your success. At least you're not failing like that person's failing. At least you're not as bad as that. So it's really those 3 things. One, becoming aware of how it's affecting your ability to love, you know, fault finding, seeing that it's crippling your number one goal in life, right? Jesus says, what is the one most important thing? It's to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? If you're looking at faults in your neighbors, you're not going to be able to love them as you love yourself, right? And so it's recognizing that it's hobbling your ability to answer the number one teaching of all of the great souls, to love. And then second of all, recognizing that you're externalizing your fight. If somebody particularly is offending you in a more than natural way, it's because you've externalized your own fight, your own failing in dealing with that fault. And so becoming aware of that. And then third, understanding your separation from it so that you see that it's unnecessary to have an opinion about somebody else's behaviors. It's just not necessary. Opinions are just predilections for messing things up. It's attachment. You know, an opinion and an attachment are very close to the same thing. So does that help at all? Anyway, those are things that I run through in trying to get rid of those.
Swamiji?
Yes.
I think, oh, I'm sorry.
No, please
Please.
go ahead. That's your question. Yeah.
I like a lot of those. I think sometimes I wonder how much is natural, or just a part of like duty, because I work as a manager, and oftentimes I have to like really zone in on my direct reports and see what they're doing good and bad. I'm
Uh-huh.
a perfectionist, and it's really bad. I never let it out, but it boils inside. It's it's like chronic. It's been like a year's habit of it. So it's
Uh-huh.
really messing with me because everything seems so out of proportion or so much bigger than it is. Like
Mhm.
the littlest things will make me feel like, why? Like that's not proper behavior or conduct in something. It's just, and it just snowballs. And then when I get home, I'll be like, oh, do you remember like 3 years ago when that friend said that? Hmm. And it just kind of sinks into all these other parts of my life. But it's also, I have to be cognizant of things like that on my duty. So it's like,
Right. Well,
I don't know how to
yeah.
do it in a healthy way.
Yes, yeah, and as long if it remains in that way, there's not a big problem there. I mean, already you're aware of it, and already you're curbing your behaviors and trying to do the right thing with it. That will take care of itself. You know, just being aware of it like that will help. But the other one is don't let your mind get away with that. You know, your mind is your disciple. You are not your mind. Your mind is your disciple. And so if your mind is behaving in a way that isn't acceptable to you, stop. When it sits there and brings up something your friend did 3 years ago, don't accept that as your own thought about your friend. It's not. It's an errant samskara that has expressed in the mind. Turn to the mind and say, absolutely not. We are not going to bring up a non-existent thing from a non-existent past and color this beautiful moment with bad feelings because of something that no longer exists. We're not going to do that. We're not going to live that way. And you be that adamant and move on. That's all. But don't identify with the mind as being you. You know, understand the mind as your disciple to train. And when the opportunity comes, when you catch the mind doing things that it shouldn't be doing, don't get upset with yourself for doing things you shouldn't be doing. That's attachment to mind. And you're just going to trouble the mind more by dealing with it from that perspective. It's like trying to calm the water of a pool by getting in and flattening the waves. It's not going to happen. You have to stand outside, you know, and let the waves calm through discernment. So like that, you know, keep yourself aware. The second thing is if you are correcting somebody, before you do it, you know, don't ever do it on the spot if you can help it. You know, give it some time to where you go back, make sure you sort out your mind, make sure it's not coming from a grudge, make sure it's not coming from anger, make sure it's not coming from jealousy. You know, where it should come from, all correction should always come from a desire to help somebody reach an ideal for them. Right? All teaching should come from love, a desire to lift that person up. If your anger comes from a place of tearing them down, or you've got a good point, oh, this will really level their ego, you know, then that's troublesome. So my recommendation, you know, I learned this one from my father, because my father never spanked me at the time of my infraction. It was always, he would always say, you know, if I'd done something wrong, or if he'd caught me doing something wrong, he'd say, come up to my room in a half an hour. And then I had to sit there and think about a spanking for a half an hour because I knew what was coming. You know, I'd go up to the room, and then my father would sit there and he'd say, do you understand why I'm going to spank you? And, you know, we would have a very honest conversation about it. And he would always use, I hated it terribly, because he would always say it before he spanked me. He said, "This hurts me more than it hurts you. I want you to know that." And he would wallop me according to my infraction. A minor one, it might be just a big swat with the hand. If it was a terrible one, there'd be a belt involved. And so it's like that. Give yourself some time. My father gave me a half an hour. And I asked him, actually, when I was in college, I asked him, "Why did you always do that? It made me suffer so much for that half an hour." And he said, "Because I swore when you were born that I would never." He said, "I swore when you were born that I would never hit you out of anger. I would never punish my child out of anger." And that's the way. And so we carry that through even your work relationships. It's the same. Make sure that you're correcting, that you're teaching in an effort to lift that person, to encourage that person, to be helpful to that person. If it comes from other places than that, then spend more time separate until you can get a handle on that and work around that. All right. Does that work?
Swami,
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Ganga? Is that Ganga? I don't know. But
yeah, that's me.
It's
Swami.
Geeta.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Swamiji, what if two people, like it's good that what Ma said, that not to look for faults, basically, we should be basically making ourselves responsible for our actions and not put the blame on another person. That's very good to take responsibility. However, yes, and it's important to speak from love and all that. But what if two people have the same opinion about another person? Then it's
Well-
not. Then how can two people have the same opinion? Then there is some truth in it.
Well, the truth of that is that you're gossiping with somebody else about somebody else.
So somebody felt bad about something and you felt bad at the same time. And so you both realize that that should have happened. And you obviously discuss. It's not gossip, it's factual. Sometimes it happens.
It is gossip. Discussing other people's faults is gossip.
Even though when you get hurt so badly.
Even though anything. Unless you guys are coming up with a plan to help that person because of the love and kindness in your heart, if that's not the motive for discussing their fault, then you're gossiping. There's never a good reason to discuss somebody else's faults without them present.
But then you discuss sometimes how to handle it better.
That can be done if it's like that, if it's from a place of charity, and you will know where it's coming from, but it's up to you to take the time to consider where it's coming from. But discussing other people's faults is not a good practice and should be avoided as much as you possibly can, because by the means that you judge others, you yourself will be judged. So you had better make sure that you're walking that tightrope of your own good behavior, and that there's not two people out there somewhere else who are sitting and having the same conversation about one of your faults and one of your shortcomings, right? And so this is how we do that. Just make sure that your conversation is happening because of love. And if you're not absolutely sure of that, then just be quiet. It's better just to be quiet than it is to speak without knowing that what you're saying is coming from a good place, coming from a place of love, right?
So you keep getting bashed up all the time. I mean, mentally, by somebody. I'm just saying. So then there is a problem. It cannot be like, and you don't know how to handle it. So you do discuss with someone how to handle it.
Okay, well, that's coming from a good place. That's coming from a good place. That's coming from a place of a desire to resolve the situation. The situation does have to be resolved. But as far as it has to do with you, live in peace. As far as it has to do with you, live in peace. If it passes that point, then yes, you'll have to decide that, well, maybe this is a tiger god, and I need to get away from this person and salute them from a distance. We can't have an intimate relationship, or we can't be good friends, or we can't work in the same kitchen or something like that. You know, to have a positive resolution is a great thing. But in the end, grace is always better. You know, if you can understand, like that young monk that joined the monastery that had anger issues, and I was taking them on, you know, and getting really frustrated and getting all worked up. And I went to Swami and said, I want to be transferred to the retreat. I don't want to stay here in the city because I can't deal with this guy. And what did Maharaj say to me? He says, what, can't you just see that's the way he is? What does it have to do with you? You know, if he's angry, doesn't mean you have to accept it. Let him be angry. You do what you have to do. And you take care of what you have to take care of. And so it's kind of like that, you know. Some people have faults. Some people aren't nice. Some people are rude. Some people are this, that, and the other. To the ability that you can live at peace, you let them be what they are. If they're not, once they stop getting a rise out of you, chances are they're going to quit doing it anyway. But I say that jokingly. But nonetheless, you see, do what you can for peace. Whatever you can do, do it. Whatever the other person is doing, you can't control. If it's a situation of physical harm or mental harm, then you have to consider ways of getting out of that situation, right, for yourself, or at least getting a distance in there. And if that requires talking to somebody to work that out, that's fine, because you're being solution oriented. But if you're just discussing to get people on your side, or to prove that that person's a bad person, or that person needs to go, or you know, if the talk is coming from that motivation, then you're not in a very good situation. You know, just, we know the answers to these questions, frankly. You know, we know when we're being loving and when we're being selfish. And really the real answer to all of this is be aware of what your inner world is like. That's that awareness. Be present. Listen to yourself. Do you hear love coming out of your mouth? Do you see love in the heart motivating these words and these actions? If yes, then go forward. If not, stop immediately. If you're not sure, stop immediately and take it to the mother, you know, and work that out first, and then go with the rest of your solution.
Thank you,
right?
sir.
Yeah, yeah. Regarding a devotee who wanted to purchase mother an expensive cloth, she said, if he will brook no disappointment and wants to spend the money, let him buy a piece of land whereby the sadhus and the devotees will be served. You know, always, mother's always thinking about the greater good. You know, and this comes down to that question of knowing yourself. You know, because it's wonderful to take a beautiful sari to Thakur to dress him up for his birthday. Be careful though when you do that kind of thing, because it's quite often ego driven. You know, it's quite often you being showy in making these kinds of offerings. You know, mother's saying, worship God in men, in people first. The highest form of worship is to see God in others, right? And so it's better to spend that money feeding someone who's suffering, you know, or helping someone who's in need. That's a better form of worship than to go buy an expensive whatever for the shrine. You know, the worship of the living God is more important, and that's where our big investments should go. The worship of the deity in the temple is a matter of the heart. And the best worship there you can do is your self-surrender and your conquering your ego. You know, that's the best offering to make in a temple. And if you want to get something for the deity, perfectly fine. But check yourself, because it's easy to make a show of worship in the temple, or prostrations in the temple, or anything in the temple. You know, and again, I'm not just saying this. I suffer through this. You know, I can remember sitting in the temple one day doing a meditation. Nobody was there. It was just by myself in the temple. And I was sitting there having a nice meditation, And then I heard the back door open. I heard somebody walk in, and I heard my mind. I heard my own mind was so happy that somebody had caught me meditating on my own. You know, that there was an ego thing there, like, oh, look, they found me in the temple meditating. You have to be careful about doing things that have a public aspect to them. Check your heart, check your ego, make sure that it's an action based on devotion, and not a desire to be recognized or to be seen, or to even get some kind of tit for tat with God. I know that that's very common. People think, oh, if I give this, I'll get that. God is not a mercantile enterprise. He's not doing tit for tat. You know, Mother says in other places, he makes it rain on the rich and the poor, on the good and the evil. You know, he makes the sun shine on everyone, and it shouldn't be viewed in other ways like that. So if you want something from the Lord, understand thou art that, and go inside, go internally, and you know, hash it out, work it out, but don't buy it, right? We don't buy things from the divine. We respond to love. That's what we do with the divine. All right. I would say any more questions, but those were great questions. That was wonderful. But anything else anybody wants to discuss? Or
I have a little thought.
Yeah.
Holy Mother's relatives were really a headache, but she always took it in the most incredible way possible. And when even some of her disciples would say, Mother, why don't you do this or that about them? She just said, if one person in the world doesn't find fault with others, will the world come to an end? You know, it's like she just absolutely refused to do that.
Yeah.
On any
No,
level.
and exactly right. Exactly right. And what's even more profound to me is that she says that there was a time in her life where finding fault with others was a problem for her, and we see that later on she says it's impossible for me to see a fault in someone else. So you see how sincere and earnest she was about disciplining that practice out of herself, you know, getting rid of it. That's one of the peculiar things, I think, in both Thakur and Ma as avatars, is that how absolutely efficient they were in taking care of their attachments. You know, when Thakur locked himself in the suite room, or borrowed the hookah, or borrowed the beautiful, you know, shawl, he just had to do it once because he was so aware, and he could watch what it did to the mind. And, you know, with that shawl, he said, all it does is increase rajas, and he stomped on it and wanted to set it on fire.
Started sitting on it too.
Yeah, no, and that's, you know, we should feel that same way when we see ourselves judging others, when we see ourselves finding fault in others. We shouldn't think that's a small thing. We should understand that is why there is war. that is why there's suffering in the world, you know, because war is nothing more than a larger group having those judgmental feelings or accusations toward another, and the other side pushing against in the same way. Whereas if both sides sat down with love as the motive in what they're doing, it'd be very hard to go to war. And so we're not in charge of countries, so we're not responsible for countries, but you and I are in charge of ourselves. And if enough of us human beings take that charge seriously, we can move our lives in a better direction. We can at least hold the tail's dog straight. The tail's dog. We can hold the dog's tail straight for a while. All right. Very good. Well, Jai Ma, everyone.
Thank you, my lord. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Gabriel.
Pranams,
you.
Maharaj.
Yes,
Thank
Swamiji.
you.
Namaskar, Ma. Be well, everyone.
Thank you.